everyone, and welcome to Breaking into the Industry with Short Fiction. My name is Brie Bonomo, and I am so happy to be a part of the Authortube Writing Conference of 2024. So if you are new here, if you've never been on my channel before, I am a fantasy, sci-fi, and horror writer whose work has been published and is forthcoming between the Stygian Society and Havoc, hopefully more in the future. And I also have published poetry under my pseudonym B. Lapka through Beyond the Veil Press. So I'm very excited to be talking about more specifically short story publication, as it can be a wealth of experience and can also launch you into your own writing career with novels. So to start, I am going to have a presentation. So we will have a lot of visuals and hopefully things that you guys can use. And I'm going to ask that you please hold questions until the end. I do have a lot of information to go over, and I want to make sure you guys get all this information. And then at the end, we'll have time for questions, and I want to just say that I will answer them to the best of my ability. I am still relatively new at short story publications, but I have a few under my belt, and I am always trying to get more out there. So we will talk more at the end. So to start, what is a short story? According to blurb.com, a short story is a story with a fully developed theme, but significantly shorter and less elaborate than a novel. This can be a lot of subgenres as well. So in the next slide, we'll kind of talk about the parameters of short stories. So most short stories are under 15,000 words. This may vary. I've seen sometimes up to 25,000 words for some publications, but that really gets into the novella or novelette territory. So most of the time, if you're looking at magazine publications, it's under 15K. The average is about 1,000 to 75,000 words. And this is pretty much across the board, whether you're in fantasy or in contemporary or literature, litfic, I should say, sorry. While I have the most experience publishing under fantasy, horror, and sci-fi, this is so broad across the board. Then we also have flash fiction. This can range from anywhere from 5 words to 2,000 words. Again, the common flash fiction will often say about or up to 1,000 words. We also have microfiction. So if you see this term, that means they're usually aiming for 300 words or less, and it is super challenging. While I have not gotten any microfictions published, I have written them, and they are extremely hard, but they are a great way to engage your brain and work on cutting those words down. Some key elements to short stories. We're really just focusing on a single plot and theme. This means that you're not going to have multiple things going on at once, like novels will have. Like you might have your main plot in a novel, and then you'll have like this person reconciling with their dad, this one going off to have a romance, etc. You're only looking at one single plot or one single theme. So if your theme, for instance, is mental health, like that's all the story is going to cover. For short stories, instead of starting with kind of slow and building up to the rising action, you're starting right in the action. You want to get going immediately so that you're hooking your readers in. Remember, this is no more than 75,000 words in most cases, so you really want to pull people in and get them going with something exciting happening. You also tend to have less characters because you have such few words to write with. You're not going to have a lot of the flourishes of multiple side characters. Most of the time, like I don't think I've had any more than 3 characters on page, but I tend to have 1 or 2 at the most. And that's just me personally. What's really important in short fiction is that you are concise in your delivery. No frills. We don't want to be dilly-dallying and having all these extra beautiful language thrown in. That's saved for the novel. We really just want to get into the meat and potatoes of our story so that we get the most out of our word limit. And, just to further emphasize the point, every single word matters. You will be cutting a lot of words if you are writing short fiction because you want them to be as clear and poignant as possible. In case you guys don't know what some short stories are, I have a few famous examples. Edgar Allan Poe comes to mind a lot of the times because he has quite a few, just quite a few out there. The Raven, The Telltale Heart, those are two of my favorites. You might also have heard something like The Lottery by Shirley Jackson, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, The Monkey's Paw, which was one of my favorites growing up. There is so many short stories out there because there are tons of online and print magazines. So if you're looking into more recent stuff, you might want to look into for like the fantasy sci-fi, Apex magazine, Martian magazine, the science fiction and fantasy magazine. Like those are all really big ones that are out there right now. And of course, on the more like literary side, you have the New Yorker. So anywhere you can pretty much find short stories, whether they are free or a paid market, and we'll get to that later. So, writing to deadline. I'm going to preface this by saying that most of this is probably nothing new. I am not inventing or reinventing the wheel. I am just going to say that some of these tips and tricks are even more important when you are talking about short fiction. If you have done novels, and especially if you've written novels and published them, then you kind of know that you're going to need a deadline, and there are things that you need to do in order to make that deadline. So let's go through some of them. I feel like this should be obvious, but you would be surprised by how many times people forget or don't write something down or don't realize that they've procrastinated this long. But you really need to know when the deadline for submitting is. A lot of times I've found in short fiction, there are submission windows. Much like querying an agent in traditional publishing, they will open the window for a certain time and then they will close the window. The advantage of short fiction versus agent querying is that normally agents kind of don't give you like I'm opening until this date. They might say, I'm open until I get this many queries, which can be in 5 days, 5 hours, 5 weeks. With short fiction magazines, they're going to tell you when they're open for. So recently I looked into Abyss and Apex magazine, and they are opening from August 1st to August 15th. And anything you want to submit has to be within that window. And if it's later, then you have to wait till the next time. So it's super important when you're trying to plan to know these deadlines. If you miss the window, you miss the window, especially if your heart was set on doing a specific story for a specific magazine. If you miss it, then you have to wait or look for something else. Second, that I think is very helpful with writing to deadlines, kind of goes along with the first one, but I would really encourage everyone to follow the magazines and presses on social media. There's so many that I follow that post constant reminders. So they flood my brain and I am reminded constantly that they are closing or they have a specific deadline coming up. So this is so helpful for me as someone who has so much going on in my personal life that I tend to find that I'll forget that the deadline is coming up if I didn't write it down somewhere. So I love to follow them and just get those visual reminders. Because I often engage with the magazines as well, like I'm constantly looking for them, they tend to come up in my Instagram in particular all the time. So just another thing to helpful. I know the Stygian Society, and I saw Holly Rhiannon in here before. If you guys don't know the Stygian Society, they've also posted when their windows open and it's on their website. So just, more to follow around. In addition to following their social media, subscribe to newsletters. There's one that I recently saw, Flame Tree Press, will only tell you when they are opening for anthology submissions through their newsletter. So it's just as important to be following all of their things if you're really serious about short fiction publication, because you never know what you might miss because you're not following them on every single platform. And I think the newsletter is the easiest one to do because they'll usually give you some indication in the subject where you could be like, oh, do I want to read this or do I not? Or you can skim through it and you don't always have to read every single thing in it, but you might get publishing news that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise. I think I say this later and it's not in this section, but Patreons are also a super powerful thing because most magazines will have a free tier where you can get just their general updates and information. And if you're active on Patreon, that's a great way to engage further. The tried and true, please take your personal life and or work life into account. We all get busy. We all have tons of things that can creep up on us that we schedule out in advance, like vacations. If you know that you want to write for Havoc and Havoc closes on June 28th, then you also have a vacation scheduled from the 15th through the 25th. You may want to try to squeeze in that writing before the 15th. So that way you're giving yourself time to edit and process it. I know it sounds probably, as I said, something you should already be taking account for, but I personally have missed deadlines because I forgot of something going on in my life and, didn't have time to edit it. Also, I have a very busy day job. I am a mental health counselor. So sometimes my days get extremely crowded. And then some days I have absolutely nobody show up. So on those days, it's nice that I can maybe do a little bit of writing, but that's not all the time. So because of that, I may kind of look advanced in my work calendar as well and go, ooh, I have a lot of tough clients, or I have like these presentations I have to participate in, or I have a training coming up. And that may also take time out because I may not have the brain power during the day or the time frame at all during the work week. So again, know what your schedule is going to be like if you are writing to a specific deadline and for specific magazines. Set goals and timelines for yourself. This is just kind of an additional outside of knowing your deadline. You should also know where you want to kind of be with your writing process. Please don't send short stories without editing them. I think this should be known, but again, it happens quite often, and you're likely not even going to get on an editor's desk if you haven't edited it. I particularly go through about 3 to 4 drafts on each short story before I submit it. So I tend to try to work on my short stories at least a month in advance. So I know I usually have 1 week-ish for draft 1. I can edit it and get some feedback from my CPs. Then I'll do draft 2. So that's already up to week 3. And by the time I get my additional feedback again, by week 4, I should be on the deadline week. And that is when I will submit. Set boundaries with your friends and family as well. If this is meaningful for you, like anything, you need to set time and prioritize your work. So if you want to get into APIS and Apex, for instance, where you only have that time frame, so you want to work on your short stories for July, then you need to tell them like, hey, like I'm going to be writing for an hour today or a half hour today, or I'm going to go take a walk and I'm going to go write in the park. But whatever it is you need to do, just set those boundaries. It's only going to help you in the long run. And I think this is one of the most important things for me. But if you do not have a critique partner or you don't have accountability buddies, get some. They are so helpful. And initially, my CP was supposed to be on screen with me. Her name is Anna, and she has been insurmountable with her ability to give me great feedback and push me further in my writing. And she's always really good at being open with me, like, hey, I can definitely take a look at this, or not this time. So that has been so helpful. And I have gotten my publications because of her help. Like without her, I would not have been published at all. So I cannot stress having somebody, even if it's not the same somebody every time, because sometimes finding consistent critique partners is hard, especially if you're just starting out. I would at least try to get some feedback elsewhere. I have a Discord channel down below. It's linked down below. I tend to ask people in that Discord, like, hey, got a short story. Anybody around for feedback? So Discord channels are really good. Reddit has been really good in the past for me for critique partners when I was starting out. And of course, like just the internet, YouTube, Instagram, any type of social media, you can usually ask people and find them that way. Not guaranteeing they will be forever, but it definitely is better than nothing. And overall, this kind of goes with everything, but minimizing your distractions. When you are writing, write. And when you're not, that's okay. But if you want to get this done and you want to be a published short fiction author, then you got to get it done and try to ignore all the other things out there. I tend to use the Forest app on my phone so that I'm not looking at my phone constantly, because that is, I'm very guilty at that, opening Instagram, seeing if anybody has mentioned something. But overall, whatever it takes for you to stay focused on your work, do that. Another key piece of advice that I got from the Alaska Press Club is if you find yourself disorganized, outline. Your outline is going to look a lot different than a novel outline. You're not going to outline every single thing. Your work is not that long. But some key questions that you really want to ask yourself for a short story are, why does this story matter? What is the point of it? Why is the story being told? And what does the story say about life, the world, the times we live in? This is a really great way, and these are really great questions to hone in on what we said earlier. You want to have a singular plot and a singular theme, and you want to really hone in on that. So these questions are designed to kind of help you organize and outline so that you're getting your point across. My own example would be I was writing a story, a sci-fi story that had a theme of depression. And I wrote the story first, and I kind of didn't know which direction I wanted to go in, but I knew the depression was there. So I said the point is to kind of describe depression in a sci-fi world. And I wanted the metaphors to be there. So this short story was like an extended metaphor, if you will. And from there, I kind of figured out how to hone and weave in these sci-fi elements while keeping that core theme. So that was something I wanted to ask, why is it important and why is it being told? It's because it's a topic that means a lot to me and the people that I work with, and I see it every day. And being able to connect with others on such a personal endeavor. And then, of course, with novels, we might do a query letter. With a short story, you probably want to try to summarize it in one word. And like I said, my short sci-fi would be depression. All right, so further on staying organized. So now that you kind of know what a short story is and how you can keep up on your deadlines, I really want to focus on actually staying organized as you start submitting. So this will be including like how you keep emails sorted, how you keep track of who you're submitting to, and all of that. So the first I'm going to go through, which I realize my little head is in the way here, but we're going to talk about creating folders in your email. This might not seem like something that you need to do until you're going to look for, where did I send this and what's the status of it? I have lost a couple of my submissions back in the day, which I'm assuming were rejections because I couldn't find them anywhere. But I was not organized when I first started submitting. I was just like randomly submitting like once every 6 months and getting nowhere. So I have a Google Gmail because that's what I use. And I feel like most people nowadays use this. But this is your inbox. And right on the side here is a label. And this is going to be your friend. So you want to really hone down on everything you do. So obviously I have been doing the AWC work, and I had to create my own folder to keep everything there. So I knew where it was. This also includes things that are like my novels or projects that I'm working on. But as you can see, I have Havoc listed there because I have been published in Havoc. So all my publication information is there. I have Stygian because I was published in Stygian. So that's also there. And then you can see right above Stygian, I have rejections. So most of the time, you're going to get form rejections in this business. And I don't really feel like I need to have folders for everything I get rejected for. So I have one just labeled there so I can keep track. It makes me know too, like if I decide to submit another story down the road and it's been 2 years because maybe I've edited a lot, I may want to go back and make sure I'm not sending it to the same magazine because that's typically a taboo. Now we're going to go into two spreadsheets that, or actually, I think 3 spreadsheets that I think are incredibly important when you are looking to do some publications in short fiction. So I have 3 main types: places you want to submit, where you submitted, and monetary earnings. For places you want to submit, it kind of depends on what you actually want to include. Like what should be included, it's more like what's important for you. Where you submitted is increasingly becoming something that I need to work on because I didn't do that before. And it's really important for timelines and status more than anything. So I have a couple of screenshots here as well. I know this is probably small for some of you, so I'll just kind of walk you through it, but this is my places to submit. I have added since I've taken this screenshot, but I think some of the things that I find important for myself are to know the magazine name, the link right to the submission page. So that way, if I ever get like confused about what the submission is, if I need more details, I can click it and it takes me right there. Also, the genres accepted. Because I write in fantasy, horror, and sci-fi, so speculative fic, commonly referred to, or I also publish poetry under my pen name. I really want to make sure that I have the genres. I have recently, thank God, I saved myself the embarrassment. I was going to submit to Solar Punk magazine, and then I realized that I was sending a very depressing futuristic story to them. And I stopped myself before I even did, because solar punk is a very optimistic look at the future versus the cyberpunk or the hard sci-fi where you might be a little bit more depressing. So that's something I note in here as well, so that I know what I'm doing. So if I have a very dark and gruesome horror, that may be fitting one magazine but not another. So yes. I also have the word count, again, because short fiction is such a range. Some of the places that I have on this list are microfiction only, so under 250 words. Others are wider. I have some that are up to 10,000 words, and then I have ones that are in that normal range of 1 to 75. So I definitely love to be organized with this. I initially had places to submit in their fees, but I think I'm actually going to delete that one eventually, because as you probably can see, they're all free. I have not found any magazines right now that make you pay to submit, which is great. Sometimes you may find that, especially if it's a newer company, if they're a startup, they may be looking to like front load some money to be able to fund the project. Stygian Society had done that for their first publication. And most of the time, especially the ones that have been well established, won't have any fee. Oop, knocked my microphone away. They won't have any fee to actually submit. So I think I'm going to delete that. But initially, that was something I was considering, and that was important to me. And then last, I have how much payment would be. So anything that you see here that's blank, they're free. So they're just your name in the world. They don't actually pay you to submit. The rest of them I have specified are something that they give you. And the standard rate, so the pro rate, is about 8 cents per word. That tends to be for the magazines that are very well established and have a very good following. Some are just flat rates. So some of them might be like a $10 flat rate or a $20 flat rate. That's hard to say. Most of the time, they're anywhere between a penny to 10 cents. So, not a ton of money, but I will put a pin in that because sometimes it is worthwhile tracking how much you are getting paid. So obviously, if you guys have questions, feel free to ask me at the end, but spreadsheets have been my best friend since I started doing this, I will say. So another one would be my submission tracking example. And I am not going to lie. I did this week. I did not have one of these until I realized when I started spamming out short stories this week, because I did my tarot reading for Litha, and I was like, oh, it told me to stop holding back and just go for it. So I went crazy. I just submitted a ton of things. And then I was like, oh, some of these I'm submitting the same story for. Some of these I've submitted the story for in the past. So I decided to go through and try to find where I submitted things and what's its status. So for this one, I put the date I submitted, the publication I submitted to, the type. So again, because I have speculative fiction, poetry, flash fiction, microfiction, like I have all of that sorted out. I also have the title that I'm submitting. So anything that again, to keep in mind, like if I got rejected for my depression story, which is called There Was Only the Husk, I submitted that once before and got rejected. So I'm making sure that I'm writing this again, and it's a different magazine. And then the status. So anything you see here was either accepted or rejected. And then I have the ones that are open because I'm still waiting on getting things back. But that is really important to me now that I am doing what we call simultaneous submissions. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then the last thing, which is, again, my little face is over here, but monetary earnings. I think really this is just something to keep on track for you, especially if you are trying to get into associations. So for fantasy, sci-fi, horror, there's something that you can get into called SFWA, or Sci-Fi and Fantasy Writers Association. This kind of gives you access to like a big market of publishing and gives you a lot of connections. In order to get to that market, you do need to have $100 earned with publications that are associated with them, which is why it may not matter to you if you're not looking for this type of accolade, I guess you could say, or membership. But for some people, that means a lot. And honestly, that would be something I would like to work towards one day. Not everything I have submitted and gotten paid for would count for that, unfortunately. They do have to be associated with the association. But the main thing, mine's super small. I'm not sharing the monetary because it's not anything to hit home about. But main things you really want are, again, like the date, the publication, the amount. Really, with the date, you want the year, because some of them may only be within a certain year frame. And for me, I just kind of included mine here, where I have my 2 years of payments, and so far, we're not selling. We're not quitting my job. Oh no, what did I do? Sorry, guys. I have an extra button on my mouse, and sometimes I get a little excited and I hit it. So thankfully not taking too much time out. So yeah, so this again is an optional one, but it is important if you want to get any of those associations. All right, so we are heading into some realistic expectations, and we're about to submit. So the main thing you really want to know when you're short fiction writing, just like querying, is you want to set timelines for acceptance and rejections. A lot of websites will tell you what their period of reading is for. Apex Magazine, for instance, is a period of up to 3 months if it hits the editor's desk. So that means that I may not hear from anybody for weeks to months at a time. Also, the same thing for rejections. They may say, like, there's either on their blog or their website, they may have something like, oh, if you don't get through the slush readers, you'll be rejected within, a week, or it could be something longer. But again, just knowing what you're looking for, so you're not driving yourself crazy looking in your emails every single day. Hi, I'm guilty. I've been there. And of course, the acceptance rates is also super important. Just like querying, you are not guaranteed to get in, and you could love your story so much, and then it just doesn't work out. And it's not a personal slight on you, but it might just be that they accept literally 1% of all submissions given. Again, I'm using Apex because I would love to be published in Apex Magazine. That's like my top goal in life. And they have such a low acceptance rate that I always just tell myself I'm likely going to have to keep doing better and better every single time I write something. But yeah, I think they publish every other month, and their publications for Apex I think there's only like 6 short stories, 2 flash fictions, and 2 essays. So again, if I'm competing against like hundreds, thousands of people for 6 slots, it's nearly impossible. All right, so we're ready to submit. I'm going to tell you this multiple times moving forward. Follow the guidelines, plain and simple. You want to format correctly. If they say to format in the shun format, look that up and figure out what that is, because it's very different from anything else. Make sure you're always following the rules and what they want to the T, because oftentimes they will just throw it right out. Similarly, minimum and maximum word counts are just important. With novel writing, it tends to be a little bit vague. Like there's a lot more wriggle room with novel writing to some degree. This is if it is 1,000 words only and under, and you submit 1,001, you're done. You're out. You're not even going to be looked at, which is not worth your time or theirs. Again, should be obvious, but submit to the genre. Hi, like I just said before, if you're just tuning in, Solar Punk Magazine is a happy, hopeful, futuristic magazine. I can't submit my depressing, dark sci-fi. That would get rejected automatically. And I've done that before. I did try to submit a speculative poem that I thought was speculative, and they told me it wasn't. So, I mean, speculative poetry is not my forte, but regular poetry is. So we're just going to stick with short fiction. No AI. Just don't. It's sad, because I was even reading a magazine that actually closed down because AI was becoming so impossible for them to keep open. And they ended up stopping the magazine because they said they were spending hours upon hours per day trying to weed through who was submitting AI. And it was unfortunately like enough that it was becoming a problem. So don't do that for yourself. And don't do that to the publishers. Like they're working, and sometimes for smaller magazines, they're working for free. They're volunteers. So don't do that. So as Holly said, just say no. All right, simultaneous versus exclusive submissions. Simultaneous just means that you are sending the same story out to multiple publications at once. Some people do not accept simultaneous. So be sure you know that you are not sending them out to a bunch of people if they only want exclusive submissions. Most of the time, most people are open to simultaneous. They'll just say, please withdraw your query if you got accepted elsewhere. But occasionally I have seen exclusive only, because they want to see the best and they want to publish the best. And then for the most part too, keep your cover letters simple. A big thing is like know the editor's name, or like keep it vague, like hi Apex team, or because sometimes you might not be able to find the editor's name on the website easily. That's happened to me a few times. But if you are going in and you see there's a flash fiction editor and a longer fiction editor, and you are submitting to the longer fiction and then addressing it to the flash fiction editor, that might be a faux pas. I've also done that too. So we live and we learn, which is why I'm keeping it on here. Just make sure you have the right information and keep them very simple. Just say what you're submitting, like what the submission is for, what the title is, and if you had any previous publications, include those as well. Also, if you are a member of any kind of association or organization, sometimes that is great to include additionally. Know the process. So a lot of places will have what's called a slush pile, meaning you are all getting thrown in to volunteer readers, and they are going to weed them out and make sure that only the best of the best is getting onto the publisher's or the editor's desk. A lot of times they might also have second readers. So you might hit one slush pile reader, and then if they okay you'll go to a second one. Other times you usually might just go to a first round. So if you pass the slush phase, then you're going into somebody's editing box, and they are going to look at that and really consider you at that point. Again, you may have a second round depending on how big the magazine is. You may have multiple rounds of this, and you will not know any of this is happening because it's all behind the scenes. And on the editor's desk. Eventually, that's like the last step, and that's what we all hope for, is we get it to the final stage and they are going to accept it. And yes, I will say this. I'm not trying to do too much in the group, but if you have been previously published, definitely say that. That also might be discussed in the rules itself. So again, making sure you're reading the websites before you're just blindly submitting is so important. I stole this from Apex Magazine. If you can't tell, I really want to be published by Apex. But they have these nice little graphics on their website to show you their process. There's also something like Augur Magazine has a blog post of what their process looks like how many submissions they'll get, what it all entails. And they're all super helpful. So if you go to a magazine and you either see this in their submissions page or they link you to a blog, I would read it. It doesn't hurt. All right, so words of wisdom from the professionals. Since I am only a writer in this, I went out and talked to some actual industry professionals to get a little bit more information and a little bit more bang from your buck. So even though I'm not published by Apex, Rebecca E. Treasure from Apex Magazine was so kind enough to answer some questions. I also have Kelly Tai, who is a YouTuber, an online editor for Augur Magazine, and has her own editing company, Bramble and Crow Books. And I also have Phoebe, who is Phoebe Wood, is also a YouTuber, and she works as a slush reader for Apex Magazine and another magazine. All of their information is linked down below. Please go check them out. Give them love. They took their time to give me some information for you guys, and I appreciate them immensely. So let's start to what contributes to rejection. Much like anything in life with writing, certain things are going to get you rejected pretty quickly. Of course, any harmful content, nothing that's blatantly homophobic, racist, sexist, overall insensitive. Nobody wants that. Nobody's looking for that. Don't do it. Submitting something that the publication is not looking for. Again, if you are submitting a happy, lucky contemporary romance to a dark fiction and fantasy magazine, you're going to get rejected. Simple as that. So this could also be the wrong tone, the genre, or the length. So if you are, again, looking at a Havoc, for instance, is a 1K and under only. So if you're submitting that's 5,000 words, you're not going to get accepted by any means. Also note, too, that sometimes sub-genres will vary, meaning that you might have a general hey, I accept horror and fantasy works. And that if you feel like your short story falls under that, then go ahead and submit it. Sometimes they may be even broader by saying speculative fic, and sometimes they may be a little bit narrower, where they may say we're looking for slipstream and cyberpunk and these words that you may have to look up, because I certainly did when I started this. So be careful with that too, because if you have a cyberpunk story and you want to submit it to a solar punk magazine, that's not going to work. So that's just a little bit extra there to be considerate of. And then, of course, not adhering to the guidelines. Every single editor I spoke to told me this. So, be aware of that. That's a big thing that happens. So this is a little bit more personal, and I have each of their statements, but what makes someone stop reading? According to Kelly, she basically said that short stories that like to take their time without knowing they're taking their time. So it's not intentional that you're being very slow. Remember what I said in the beginning, you want to get right into the action. So if you don't get those critique partners and eyes on it before you are submitting, and you don't know that you're being slow, that can be a rejection for some editors. Phoebe, who is our slush reader, said that things that will get her to reject something and move it, as a rejection would be that the writing isn't strong, it doesn't have much of an impact on her, or it doesn't fit the magazine. And Rebecca said her main issues that she's noticed is egregious typos, too many world-building questions, such as if I have to keep asking questions and they're not answered within this story, that's too many world-building questions. Hiding info to trick the reader. We all love a good twist at the end, but if you're intentionally trying to weasel your information in there and it should just be said out loud, when I'm editing people's stories, I tend to say that. I'll just be like, tell me, stop holding back. Just tell me what you want to say. Because normally by the time you get to it, people are fed up. They don't even care what the big reveal is. And then stagnant characters or characters that aren't doing anything. If your story isn't engaging and your characters aren't contributing to that story, people are not going to be reading it. Common mistakes, not knowing the why of the story. Remember, go back to the questions for outlining. This is a big one that people see often. Not being confident in the story. So your uncertainty will bleed through. If you're not sure what you're writing or what the point is, your readers aren't either. Not holding the reader's attention. Not including the theme. So sometimes you will be publishing to a theme. Stygian Society, for instance, had witching hour as their theme. They wanted all the witchy goodness, which is one of my fave topics to create stories to. So if I submitted something, which actually happened to me with Stygian, I submitted my witching hour story to Stygian, like as their Stygian thing, and it did technically get rejected first because it wasn't for that theme. So that happens. Thankfully now it is getting published, but it took me a while. So not following the guidelines. Overall, all of these tend to bleed back into this. Phoebe in particular said when she's reading through the slush pile, she will consider this when she is reading and debating on if she wants to give it a go-ahead to the editor's desk. The ending doesn't work. The pacing is off. It doesn't do anything new. So that story of why this story in particular and not the next one using the same tropes, you really want to wow them. It's more of a vignette than a story, meaning you're just kind of taking a slice out of something. And there's no real meaning or plot to it. It feels like a setup for a punchline. We don't like that very much. And what stands out? According to Kelly, stories that are colorful, plays with language, and are full of complicated relationships and wondrous world building. This is something that she really likes to see for Augur magazine. And probably herself too, I would imagine. Every reader wants to be moved and to experience something new, but also have their favorite tropes that they enjoy just because. So again, creating your tropes and making it into something new or exciting or fresh. And Rebecca said, in general, a strong voice, creative take on a plot or a character or setting, clean and vivid writing, and adhering to submission guidelines are going to serve you well. So while all of these people do work for specific companies like Apex or Augur, these are pretty much their personal opinions. They don't necessarily reflect the magazines. But in general, if you talk to anybody in the short fiction, I'm sure most of them will kind of come to some similar consensus. So remember, reading is subjective. You could have a very, very good story on your hands. Don't sell yourself short, but you might just not be at the right time, the right place, the right magazine. It's just like anything in writing. It's not going to please everybody. Also keep in mind too, remember when we talked about, setting realistic expectations, your slush readers will read out 75 to 90% of the stories before an editor ever sees them. The slush readers are chosen because they're good at what they do, but there's such a small percentage of people actually being passed on to an editor. So if you're rejected pretty quickly, that's just the name of the game. And Rebecca had this to say, which I really loved and wanted to include. She said, focus on the things you can control, your writing, your ethics, your craft, and leave the things you cannot, your acceptances and rejections and career success, to the fates. Last but not least, before we open it up to some questions, I do just want to kind of put in some of the resources for short fiction that have helped me in my craft. This is definitely not exhaustive. I could have probably spent days trying to find resources. So these are literally just the ones that I follow and interact with that have helped me. First is Apex magazine. They have what's called Snap Judgment every couple months. I actually participated in it in the October one that I have here, and I got some really, really great feedback. They did end up choosing mine, and they were live. So if you guys are interested at all, you can go look on that. I believe it's still on YouTube. But I really, really loved that because especially with short fiction, you want to bring people in and they will tear you apart. Basically, in the Snap Judgment, they only ask for 250 words. And if they would stop reading within those 250 words, they raise their hand. And if everyone raises their hand, then they stop reading. And then they'll talk about why it didn't work for them. This is entirely free. Not guaranteed that they will pick yours, but it is free. So it's a huge resource that I definitely implore you guys to take part of if you can. This is where I said the magazine Patreons as well. Lots of good info there, lots of good engagement, especially for deadlines and timelines. Apex Magazine, again, has flash fiction every month, and they post what the theme is on their Patreon on the 7th. So just some good places to look and get more insight with, especially interacting, you know. Rebecca Heyman's First Line Frenzy is free on Instagram. She's really great with saying why your first line doesn't work or works. I don't necessarily recommend this for short stories that you're writing to a deadline, but going back in and reading through what she's doing and like what she is working with can help you write your own. If you're just writing a short story to write one and then you want help, you can submit it, but I'm sure her inbox is completely full a lot of the times. So that's why I'm saying don't write to deadline, because she might not get to your first line for months down the line, and then you might have already wanted to submit it. But just for some references, it's a really good resource. The Writer's Sanctuary and the Red Herring Society, not all of this is free. There are things that they do that you have to pay for, but all of their stuff on Instagram is super helpful. And obviously that's the free content, anything they post on Instagram. They also published their own anthology last year, and that's something to look forward to, again, break into the industry. And then Readsy also has a lot of great things. They have weekly writing prompts, and you can actually submit these and potentially earn money from them as well. But Readsy has a lot of great resources that are entirely free. So I wanted to include that because, again, you might just get more information for your craft in general. And yes, it's very much like, so the Snap Judgment is essentially like a first page critique panel. It is. Instead of doing a first page, they're only doing 250, which may or may not be a first page. Okay, so my only thing I'm just going to say, don't forget, get CP feedback and edit, okay? We just want that to be out there for every single thing you do with writing. Don't submit something you write on a first go. That's not going to get you anywhere. All right. So that was perfect timing in my opinion. So now we have about 10 minutes of questions. Anything that you guys want to touch base on in my expertise, if you will. Also, thank you so much. I really want to be published by them. I do currently have a story that is my depression story is on submission with them. I'm not holding hope for it, but I would love that to happen. Thank you. Thank you for coming, and thank you. I'm so happy. I spent so much time on this presentation. I was so excited to be able to do it. So I hope that I included enough. I'm sure there's, like I said, other things out there, other tips and tricks, but I thought based on my own experience, this has been kind of the meat and potatoes, like the basics that you need to know. Thank you very much. Yes, important for everybody. You know, we have a very long weekend, so definitely hydrate, stretch. If you're like me, I love to put my headphones into my iPad and walk around my house while I'm listening to people. So that way I can move a little bit, or on the treadmill. That's also a good thing I've done. Okay. Any more advice for cover letters? How long should they be? I literally do no more than 3 lines. Like, it's not a query like a novel. It's literally just, hi, please accept my submission, or my, please accept my, how do I usually say it? That's not how I say it. Please consider my short story, There Was Only the Husk, for consideration in Apex Magazine. I have been published before in the Stygian Society and Havoc, and that's usually it. Sometimes I might say, like, you can find me online at my handle, but most of the time I just do 2 sentences. I tend to not be frilly because I don't care. Surface. Listen, it's never too late to get, going. I also wrote a lot. I love short stories, and I took many classes in college, and I was like, oh, I'm going to get these published, and it didn't happen. And then I kind of gave up for a little while, and I rediscovered my love, and now I'm having more success because I'm doing it the right way as well. I definitely did not always edit things, and I didn't get edits from people who knew what they were doing either. So having, again, knowledgeable CPs, like if I asked my mom to edit something, she's not going to do a good job. But having people who are also writing or constantly consuming writing media, whether it's reading or podcast or whatever, is super helpful. Okay. Thank you for the earlier cue. How often do you submit the same story if it's rejected in one place and you submit elsewhere before setting it aside? This really depends in what you are looking for. I have now I'm starting to do batch sending it out. So that's why I created my spreadsheet for that, because I am sending it out multiple times within a certain period of time. So that's why I created a spreadsheet, and I'm kind of submitting like anywhere between like 3 to 5 submissions at the same time for one story. If I'm getting rejected from all of them, then it means that I'm probably needing to edit it a little bit more, and then I might shelve it for a little while and come back when I have some spare time. My husk story that I was talking about throughout this presentation, I did the whole like deal that I normally do. So I edited it, I got some feedback, I edited again, got some more feedback. It got rejected at that stage, but then I was like, okay, I really got to pare down and get what the meat is, what my point is. And I think I did better at this time, but doesn't mean that I'm going to get published still, but it is something that I decided after a couple months. I think I originally wrote that last October, and then I came back to it in June to edit it with fresh eyes and trying it again. So I don't think there's any right or wrong answer to this, but if you are getting multiple rejections, especially if you're going to like smaller presses where they may not be getting a lot of submissions, something like there's one called Electric Spec that I found that they have a flat rate pay, but they don't get a ton. You may have a better inclination that you need to go back to editing it if you get rejected from smaller presses versus like larger ones. But that's not necessarily always the case, because sometimes they could end up getting a ton of unexpected submissions. So it really is just how you feel at the end of the day. Like if you feel like I've gotten 10 rejections from 10 different magazines, maybe it's time to shelve it. Maybe it's time to edit it again. Maybe it's time to get other eyes on it. I know that's probably not the best answer. I'm sorry, but that's probably the best I can say. Are there tropes that apply more for short fiction versus longer fiction? Not necessarily. I mean, something like a slow burn, like a slow burn romance is not going to happen in short fiction. I personally don't like insta love. So I would normally, if it was me, I would write an existing romance that it was already existing before the short story took place. But I tend to not write romance in my short fiction in general. And I do, it's really sad normally. Like I had one, a short story that I loved, but it was basically like a romance ending. So I was starting at the point where they were no longer going to be together. So like, I don't necessarily think much doesn't work. It just depends on your craft and how you can weave that in order to be effective in the story you're telling. Who do you use to CP your short stories, and how did you find them? So my CPs are actually other Authortubers. I found them doing Authortube and we connected. My current ones anyway. So I have Anna and I have Autumn, and those are pretty much my only two. I won't lie. Anna is honestly like my primary. She is fantastic, and I'm so lucky. Like I hit the jackpot with her. Before I found my two that I tend to use, I was really on the Reddit forums. So Reddit has what's called pub tips. So it's like r/pub tips. Huge accolades to that Reddit thread. I recommend going and checking it out because they do anywhere from short fiction to novels. They'll do query letter critiques and so much information. I initially found critique partners through there. Unfortunately, after a little bit of time, they fell off and I never talked to them again. So They weren't the most reliable, but I did have one for a few months that we were swapping manuscripts back and forth. So you can definitely find them anywhere. So next presentation, everyone, is Dale's Future of Self-Publishing. I probably have time for like 2 or 3 more questions. If anybody has anything else to add, like they want me to add. Also, don't forget to leave feedback for me. And it also helps you to enter giveaways, which is awesome. So if you guys are interested and you want to fill out that feedback form, I am actually giving away a short story critique plus a 1 hour, up to a 1 hour face-to-face Zoom feedback session. So I will look at your short story. I will give you like all the edits that I would give anybody in my critique partner circle to make your story stronger. And then we can meet for up to an hour on a Zoom call and talk through like why I'm suggesting some things, like where I think this can be strengthened, or just like if you want to talk through different ideas of, okay, hey, like I hear you say this, like what about this? So you could use all of that time up to an hour or less. And that is one of the prizes. So I'm really excited. If that's not how my language works, I'm really excited to do this. It's something I love to do behind the scenes. I don't offer editorial services. I don't have time in my life to do that right now because I'm a full-time therapist. But I do love to help authors and to work with them. So I can't wait to work with the winner. Yes, that's my favorite. So far, all 3 of my stories forthcoming or published are all horror, not like short stories. So that's my favorite. Come to the right place. Okay, I'm glad that helps. Sorry if it didn't, but I'm glad it did. Yes, very excited for Dale's presentation. Hi, Cool Gamer, you're coming in at the end. Not a question, but I'm submitting to a contest this week, and this helped my anxiety. Yay! Oh, congratulations on doing a submission, and good luck. I will keep you in my thoughts. It's so nerve-wracking sometimes. I get it. Even submitting, I've submitted so many now, and I'm still like, huh. So the nerves don't go away. Yes. Thank you all for coming. I'm so happy this was worthwhile. This will be on my channel afterwards. I'm not taking it down. So if you ever want to come back and view it, it'll be here. Oh, thank you so much, Holly. Yes. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it, right? I don't really think I have much more to say. If you guys, like I said, I do have below, I'll do a little self promo. I do have a Discord channel down below, and I am always open to sharing whatever knowledge I possibly can. I put a lot of effort into the Discord channel, like creating channels and different things to interact with. So if you have further questions at any point, I would recommend you joining my Discord, and you can ask them in whatever channel it's appropriate. I will often, if I need extra eyes, I'll post myself in there. And if I have time, I will read other people's. So, you can get some free feedback from me if I have time in my schedule. And I also tend to post like submission stuff. So if I see that Stygian Society is opening up for a submission window, I will post that. So yeah. So, all right. Thank you guys so much for joining my very first presentation as a expert, if you will. This went a lot better than I expected. So I appreciate you guys. And yeah, I think we're going to head out. So there we go. We're going to do a Stygian collection of these 2. So sharing it around. And I will definitely share in my Discord and social media. So less than 2 minutes. All right, guys. Thank you so much for coming. I will see you guys in the future. If you stick around, I post videos at least twice a month. Okay. Bye.